Have you ever stood in your backyard, looked across the barnyard at your flock of chickens, and wondered, is this really self-sufficiency, or have we simply bought into a beautifully marketed illusion? Let's be completely honest with ourselves for a moment. You walk into the local feed store and pay $40 for a bag of layer pellets that used to cost only $25. Your lawn consumes 3 precious hours of your Saturday afternoon, along with gasoline, effort, and sweat. Your young orchard trees are slowly being destroyed by deer because nothing is keeping watch after dark. Then, just last month, a raccoon or fox slipped into the yard under the cover of night, carried away 2 of your best laying hens, and you never heard a sound. We call this homesteading. We call it living off the grid. But in reality, it has become an expensive hobby covered in feathers. We are completely dependent on a system where every step of the journey ends with another commercial receipt. The hatchery, the feed store, the tractor supplier, and the lawnmower repair shop all continue to profit from our dependence. But what if I told you that a biological technology perfected centuries ago could solve every one of these problems? What if I told you there is a bird standing in barnyards today that trims your grass with golf course precision, sounds a deafening alarm the moment a predator enters your property, hatches her own young without a single heat lamp, and has not eaten a single scoop of store-bought grain in months? She weighs about 14 pounds, can live for more than 2 decades, and can be distinguished from her brother on the very day she breaks through her shell. Without expensive DNA testing, invasive vent sexing, or waiting an entire year to discover what you actually bought. This is the Pilgrim Goose, a true American heritage treasure. Yet today she remains on a conservation watch list because the modern homesteading world quietly forgot she ever existed. Why did we allow such an extraordinary creature to disappear from our farms? And more importantly, how can she help you break free from the costly cycle of input dependency today? Welcome back to Farmyard Care. If you are ready to build a homestead that costs less with every passing year instead of more, hit the subscribe button, turn on notifications, and let's uncover the lost story of America's most forgotten multi-purpose farm worker. Part 1. The Grazing Miracle. A bill built like a serrated shear. To understand why the Pilgrim Goose is such a remarkable game-changer, we need to look beyond her feathers and examine the biology beneath them. Geese are fundamentally different from other poultry. Chickens and turkeys are omnivores that depend on concentrated, grain-heavy diets to produce eggs and meat, but geese are specialized, obligate herbivores. In fact, they are among the most efficient pasture-grazing birds on the planet. So how do they accomplish this? Look closely at the beak of a Pilgrim goose, and you will notice that she has no teeth in the conventional sense. Instead, the inside of her bill is lined with a fascinating structure called lamellae, sharp, spiky ridges made of cartilage. Working together with a strong, muscular gizzard, the bill functions almost like a pair of serrated garden shears. Rather than ripping grass out by the roots and destroying your lawn, the goose cleanly and precisely clips the green blades near the root crown. This anatomical advantage allows a Pilgrim goose to obtain more than 80% of her nutritional needs from high-quality pasture alone. Once their adult feathers are fully developed, a pair of pilgrims living on healthy pasture can survive entirely on grass, clover, and common weeds throughout spring, summer, and early autumn. They actively search for tender young monocots, dandelions, chickweed, and plantain, the same weeds many people currently pay chemical companies to spray and destroy. Consider the extraordinary economic elegance of that system. While your laying hens are consuming bags of commercial feed at an alarming pace, a Pilgrim goose is transforming unwanted weeds into premium, iron-rich, pasture-raised protein and cups of rich, clean-burning cooking fat, all without costing your wallet a cent. As the old-timers used to say, the goose is the only livestock the good Lord gave you that pays her own rent. But how did we arrive here? Where did this extraordinary bird come from? And how did she become such an important part of early American agriculture? Part 2. The Silent Green Revolution. A history of avian labor. Long before the chemical revolution that followed World War II swept across the countryside, domestic geese were regarded as the overlooked heroes of agriculture around the world. They were not kept merely as decorative farmyard animals. They were active, self-directed workers that labored hand and beak alongside human communities. When English, Dutch, French, and German settlers sailed toward the shores of North America in the early 1600s, they brought their strongest and hardiest farmyard geese with them. They did so because they understood that these birds were easy keepers. Geese required no costly grain, could defend themselves against smaller predators, and offered an incredible collection of valuable resources: warm down for bedding, feathers for writing quills, nutrient-rich meat for holiday meals, and exceptionally clean, shelf-stable fat that served as everything from a prized cooking ingredient to a soothing remedy for colds. As American homesteads spread across the country, these geese began performing increasingly specialized jobs. In the hot and humid cotton fields of the Deep South, a lightweight and highly heat-tolerant relative of the pilgrim, the cotton patch goose, became one of the primary tools for controlling weeds. Until the 1950s, more than 200,000 geese were put to work every year in California's San Joaquin Valley alone, clearing weeds from commercial cotton fields. Imagine stepping onto a 5-acre southern farm at the height of the Great Depression. Labor was scarce, resources were almost non-existent, and the heat was suffocating. Yet out in those fields, a small, self-sustaining flock of geese worked relentlessly from dawn until dusk, 7 days a week, regardless of rain or sunshine. They carefully moved between the fragile cotton plants, picking out invasive crabgrass and nutsedge, while leaving the woody cotton stalks completely untouched. For generations of rural families, these weeding geese formed the narrow line between survival and starvation. They cleared fields without using a single drop of chemical herbicide, while grandmothers collected their enormous, rich eggs and turned them into mountains of cornbread for hungry families. Are we truly supposed to believe that today's chemical sprays and noisy fuel-burning tractors represent a step forward, or did we simply exchange a beautiful and harmonious biological partnership for a system that keeps us endlessly writing checks? Part 3. The Sentinel of the Yard: Vision, Whiskey, and the Guard Goose Myth. If you have spent any time browsing homesteading forums, you have probably encountered this familiar advice: just get one guard goose to protect your chickens from coyotes and foxes. Today, that myth needs to be completely dismantled, because it is not merely inaccurate, it can also place the animals involved in serious danger. To understand why, we need to examine the science of bird behavior. Geese are prey animals, not apex predators. Although they can be remarkably brave and fiercely protective of their own kind, their defensive behavior is driven by the instinct to protect their genetic family, their mates, nests, and goslings. A goose does not view chickens or ducks as members of her own species. If a coyote or large fox breaks through your pasture fence, a lone goose will not rush into physical combat to rescue a chicken. Instead, she will focus on preserving her own life and keep her distance from the predator. Keeping a single goose isolated among chickens is therefore not only ineffective, but deeply cruel. Geese are intensely social, flock-dependent animals that may live for 25 years, and they can suffer profound loneliness when deprived of companionship from their own species. But although geese are not bodyguards, they may be the most extraordinary natural alarm systems ever created. A goose has nearly 270 degrees of vision around her head. She can hear a broader range of frequencies than most dogs, sleeps extremely lightly, and is biologically programmed to detect even the smallest change in her surroundings. The moment an unfamiliar hawk circles overhead, a stray dog slips through the tree line, or an unexpected visitor enters your driveway, she releases a piercing, layered honk, powerful enough to wake the entire neighborhood and make any predator reconsider its next move. This warning ability is so effective that geese have even been employed on an industrial scale. In 1959, the famous Ballantyne's bonded whiskey warehouses near Glasgow, Scotland, brought in a flock of geese to patrol the grounds where their whiskey was aging. Known affectionately as the Scotch Watch, this feathered security team successfully protected 240 million liters of valuable, maturing whiskey for more than half a century, remaining on duty until 2012. During that time, they kept the grounds free of weeds and immediately alerted human guards whenever an intruder appeared. You do not need one lonely guard goose to battle coyotes. You need a breeding pair or a trio of Pilgrim geese. They will provide companionship for one another, enjoy happy and socially fulfilled lives, and serve as an active, constantly vigilant sentinel force that keeps your entire homestead alert and aware. Part 4. The Magic of Auto-Sexing. Oscar Grove's genetic masterpiece, Among all the heritage goose breeds found around the world, the Pilgrim Goose possesses a trait that can only be described as a biological miracle. In nearly every other domestic goose breed, whether it is the massive Emden, the elegant African, or the heavy Toulouse, males and females appear almost identical. If you purchase a group of ordinary white goslings from a feed store, you are essentially entering a guessing game. You must either pay a veterinarian to perform invasive physical examinations, send feather samples to a laboratory for DNA testing, or wait an entire year until one bird lays an egg or releases the sharp cry of a gander before finally discovering what you actually bought. The Pilgrim Goose removes that uncertainty completely through a genetic phenomenon known as autosexing. From the moment a pilgrim gosling breaks free from its shell, its sex can be identified with absolute 100% accuracy. Day-old males hatch with pale, silvery yellow down and light pinkish-orange bills. As they mature, they become magnificent, creamy white adults with vivid, striking blue eyes. Females, by contrast, hatch with much darker olive-gray down and deep brownish-pink bills. As they grow, they develop into soft, dove-gray adults with beautiful dark brown eyes and a distinctive white face mask surrounding the bill. This extraordinary genetic masterpiece was perfected by a legendary Iowa waterfowl breeder and geneticist named Oscar Groh. Beginning around 1895 with a historic landrace flock from Vermont, Groh spent more than 30 years carefully selecting birds for gentle temperaments, moderate size, exceptional foraging ability, and a highly stable auto-sexing plumage pattern. During the economic struggles of the Great Depression in the 1930s, Oscar Groh and his family packed their belongings and moved from Iowa to Missouri. Reflecting on their journey as modern travelers searching for a new beginning, his wife gave the breed its name, the Pilgrim Goose. In 1939, the American Poultry Association officially recognized the breed, securing its place as a cornerstone of American homesteading history. But there is one important catch that hatchery listings rarely mention. The auto-sexing trait is genetically fragile. A single cross with a commercial white goose can break that genetic connection in the very next generation. Dishonest sellers and careless breeders often market commercial hybrids as pure pilgrims, leaving unsuspecting buyers with birds whose offspring hatch in completely unpredictable colors. To protect this remarkable piece of living history, we must commit ourselves to finding, preserving, and breeding only pure, verified heritage bloodlines. Part 5. Orchard and Permaculture Integration. Harmony in the Soil. For anyone drawn to permaculture, regenerative agriculture, or sustainable backyard gardening, the Pilgrim Goose is nothing less than a dream partner. Traditional livestock can cause tremendous damage inside delicate perennial systems. Release pigs, goats, or even heavy sheep into a young orchard, and they may strip bark from the trees, eat the lower fruit buds, and compact the soil around shallow root systems. Even chickens, with their constant and aggressive scratching, can tear through tender roots and leave carefully planted garden beds looking like a battlefield. The Pilgrim Goose works with an entirely different level of ecological gentleness. Their broad, flat, webbed feet spread their weight evenly across the pasture, creating almost no soil compaction. They do not scratch through the earth. Instead, they move smoothly across the orchard floor, carefully cropping competitive grasses and fallen fruit, while leaving established perennial plants completely unharmed. Imagine a system in which weed control, fertilizer distribution, and pest management are all handled automatically by a flock of contented birds. As pilgrim geese graze between orchard rows, they naturally consume troublesome grasses such as Bermuda grass and quackgrass, along with fallen fruit that might otherwise decay and shelter overwintering insects and diseases. At the same time, they continually spread concentrated nitrogen-rich manure across the ground, cycling fertility directly back into the root zones of your fruit trees. However, successfully integrating geese into your land requires careful attention to both timing and stocking density. For ordinary orchard maintenance, a stocking rate of approximately 10 geese per acre is strongly recommended. You must also create a disciplined rotational grazing system with portable electric netting. If geese remain in one orchard paddock after consuming all the desirable grass, they will eventually grow hungry and bored. When forage becomes scarce, they may shift from grazing grass to eating the lower leaves of fruit bushes and occasionally nibbling the tender bark of young saplings. Frequent rotation concentrates their weed control efforts, reduces soil erosion, keeps parasite pressure low, and ensures the flock always reaches fresh, abundant pasture before your valuable crops begin to look tempting. Part 6. Why America Forgot Her. The Seduction of the Chemical Era. When you consider this extraordinary collection of benefits, free weed control, continuous fertilization, exceptional predator alerts, no feed bills, and a lifespan of 20 years, it seems almost impossible that this bird ever came close to extinction. How could we allow such a valuable animal to disappear from American farms? The answer is painfully simple: the industrial agriculture boom that followed World War II. During the 1950s, chemical corporations began aggressively promoting synthetic, selective herbicide poisons to farmers across America. Suddenly, products such as 2,4-D and glyphosate were celebrated as the greatest thing since sliced bread. Farmers were told they could replace the daily management of a living flock of hard-working weeding geese with one application of a highly toxic chemical spray. At the same time, the commercial poultry industry experienced massive consolidation. Large operations began favoring specialized, rapidly growing white breeds, such as the Emden, which could quickly reach slaughter weight while confined in crowded spaces and fed cheap, subsidized commercial grain. Slow-growing, highly independent, deeply seasonal heritage breeds such as the Pilgrim, birds that resisted crowded, dark battery cages and demanded open skies and green pasture, were pushed aside as economically outdated. The industry systematically dismantled agricultural systems that were self-replicating and required very few purchased inputs. Why? Because a self-sufficient farmer who breeds Pilgrim geese, raises them on free pasture, and uses them to weed crops has no reason to purchase commercial chemical products. That farmer also has no need to buy truckloads of manufactured feed. The modern agricultural complex was built by people who profit when your operating costs never decrease. They persuaded us that traditional, pasture-efficient, multi-purpose farm workers had become obsolete, then sold us a cycle of permanent dependence wrapped inside a corporate receipt. And when the geese vanished, we lost far more than a bird. We lost part of our ecological resilience, our traditional food culture, and our ability to remain self-reliant. Part 7. Restoring the Loop. Practical lessons for the modern homesteader. But here is the beautiful thing about history. It never moves in a perfectly straight line. The opportunity to bring the Pilgrim Goose back is still here, and doing so may be one of the most practical and rewarding investments you can make in your land today. If you are ready to give geese a chance, let's look at how to set your flock up for success and avoid the common first-year mistakes that ruin so many beginners' plans. First, never buy just one goose. Geese are deeply social animals that are meant to live in a flock. A single isolated goose will become lonely, stressed, and miserable, and she may express that misery through constant, restless screaming that can drive both you and your neighbors completely mad. Begin with a breeding pair, or ideally, a trio made up of one gander and two geese. This creates the perfect self-sustaining unit for starting your own heritage breeding program. Second, never skip quarantine. When you bring your beautiful new pilgrims home from a heritage breeder, do not release them directly into the chicken yard. Any new bird may carry hidden pathogens for several weeks before obvious symptoms appear. Keep your newcomers in separate housing for at least 2 to 4 weeks, positioned no less than 10 meters away from your existing flock. Third, understand their fencing needs. Unlike large, heavy commercial geese that can be contained behind a low barrier, lightweight heritage breeds such as the Pilgrim and Cotton Patch still possess their natural athletic and aerodynamic abilities. Lighter females and active young birds can easily clear a standard 3-foot farm fence. To keep them safely inside their assigned pasture, install fencing at least 4 feet high and increase it to 6 feet near busy roads or high-risk predator routes. A quick, painless annual trim of the primary flight feathers on one wing after the autumn molt will also help keep them safely grounded and prevent unexpected visits to the neighbors. Fourth, provide unlimited access to clean water. Geese do not need a huge, expensive pond, but they must have water deep enough to submerge their entire bills and rinse their sinuses to protect their respiratory health. A deep rubber tub or plastic kiddie pool, emptied and refilled every day, is enough to keep them healthy, comfortable, and encouraged to breed. By respecting their biology, providing secure nighttime shelter from predators such as foxes, and allowing them to forage freely across your pasture, you will begin to see your feed costs fall, your lawn maintain itself, and a beautiful closed-loop cycle of fertility and abundance return to your land. Conclusion: a living link to a self-sufficient future. The Pilgrim Goose is far more than a beautiful historic bird with striking blue eyes. She is a living, breathing connection to a time when agriculture was built around ecological harmony, biological efficiency, and true self-sufficiency. She stands as quiet proof that the tools we need to create a resilient, low-input future are not hidden inside chemical laboratories or industrial factories. They are already standing in our barnyards, waiting for us to remember their value. This spring, as you plan your garden beds, calculate your feed expenses, and look across your lawn, ask yourself, are we going to continue playing the industrial game, or is it finally time to let nature take over the operation? Perhaps it is time to step back into a wiser, slower, and far more beautiful way of farming. Perhaps it is time to give the Pilgrim Goose a place on your land. Thank you so much for joining us today on Farmyard Care. If this practical, in-depth look at heritage livestock was useful to you, share this video with another homesteader who is tired of expensive feed store bills. Leave your thoughts in the comments below, and we will see you in the next episode. Keep caring for your land, keep honoring the old ways, and happy farming.